Welcome to Playtonics. I'm Jords.
I'm Rocky, and this is the show where we turn bits of fiction into game sessions, talking about structure and prep and basically all the other stuff that is not covered by which system should I use. Jords, I've got a bit of a special topic in mind for you this week. Well, in mind for both of us, really.
This week, you say?
Far out. This month. Yeah, this month I've got a bit of a special one, and we're going to do it in a slightly weird way because it's so broad, but we'll get to that in a sec. This month we are talking about Alastair Reynolds' Revelation Space universe.
Ooh, this is a good one. I love this.
So this, for a bit of context, this is the book recommendation or the series recommendation that I credit with us being friends at all.
It's huge if true, and I think it's true.
I think that's how all of this got started. I overheard Jordan talking about a book in the lunchroom. I was like, what was that? What was that book you were recommending, bud? And it kind of all escalated from there.
Yeah, you read that and like the following 4 books in rapid succession. A few years later, hosted a podcast together. That's how friendships develop.
It's the science fiction book recommendation to hosting a podcast together pipeline that plagues all white men.
Revelation Space. All right, this
Revelation
one,
Space.
I remember I first wanted to read this way back when I was like a 13-year-old because it had the shiniest covers on the bookstore shelves. Like holographic prints with really cool spaceships on the front. And then when I started reading it, it was unlike anything that I had been exposed to at that point in time. Most of my like space opera type things were much more like sci fantasy, Star Wars-esque. But this was hard science fiction. This one really was like, let's dig into some of these topics and how societies would live in an age bounded by the speed of light.
Yeah. So Reynolds was a working like astrophysicist. So he studied, I think, like neutron stars or something, and then became a science fiction writer. So he's like a published astrophysicist who's turned his hand to science fiction, and it shows.
It's so good.
So this one's interesting because there's a core book series, but there's also a broader universe, and he's written a bunch of stories in that universe. So kind of the way I thought we would, I guess, do today's episode is we'll have a quick chat about the overall vibe of like what it means to be Revelation Space, but then I thought we might do 3 little mini preps, if you like, 3 little mini sessions. Yeah. It's, you know how like you go to a restaurant and it's like, oh, this is like salmon 3 ways. This is Revelation Space 3 ways. So yeah, we'll start with a little bit of a look at like what is the vibe of the universe overall, and then look at a couple of the specific little things that old mate Al has done in his imaginary playground out there in the universe in the future. So as the person who introduced me to Revelation Space universe, what is the vibe, Jords?
It's really hard to capture in a pithy one-liner. Like, let's give a brief overview of the timeline.
Up to 2, perhaps even 3 lines.
Okay. Humanity spreads to the stars. Governments are unstable. There are enormous power disparities between colony planets. Is that enough of a fabric?
I mean, I think that's certainly the content. The thing that struck me about it is the tone, right? Like there's plenty of things about people spreading out into the universe. But in this one, the universe is inexplicably empty.
Yes, that is very true.
Except for the ruins, the ghosts, sometimes even literally of civilizations that have been extincted for reasons we don't understand. The galaxy is a graveyard. And that really gives you an idea of the whole tone, because it is dark makes it sound edgy, which it isn't necessarily, but it is like gothic and Lovecraftian and filled with like an oppressive sense of impending doom and emptiness.
I was going to say bleak is the word that I would use rather than dark, but I actually think this is a two-tone timeline, because when humanity reaches its like first big diaspora and they found a civilization around Yellowstone, that is actually incredibly hopeful, glorious Belle Epoque era, fantastic, and then it all goes to shit real bad, and then we hit the super bleak timeline.
Yeah. And I mean, even in the Belle Epoque stuff, like this stuff is all sitting in the background, you know, it's all against the background of like, to borrow the D&D phrase, Yellowstone is the point of light. And just because we have a couple of stories set, you know, inside the point of light does not mean that it's not surrounded by
very true
darkness. Literal space, like darkness.
Literal emptiness of light. We have an interesting parallel here where the Belle Epoque era is kind of characterized by extremely wealthy people building starships to go out on archaeological digs. It's like very roaring 20s, but instead of we're doing it on Earth, we're now doing it in space. And our journeys aren't like, oh, we've got to sail the ocean. It's we have to travel the enormous empty void between stars, which subjectively might take a couple of years, but from a bystander on the planet's surface could be 5 decades.
Yeah, one of the things that, and this is a pro tip for new readers, I did not realize that the dates at the start of each chapter were quite so important. But every chapter has a date, and it's like, oh, you are meant to look at these, and because they're told in subjective time order, but because Al does the math for all of his, I'm calling him Al like we know each other, because Reynolds does all the maths.
Because my boy Al
does all the maths for his like time dilation. I assume he does the actual maths. Like,
I don't think he's fucking around. I think this is on point.
The external timeline is like radically different, and so the subjective timeline of the characters and like how that matches up with things that we know are happening, for example, outside the ship, is actually important. And so you need to look at the little dates at the start of the chapters.
There is no hyperspace here.
And playing with that as a concept of like, playing with time dilation, playing with like
when information arrives somewhere.
Exactly, because the information can also only travel at the speed of light. So yeah, playing with this like Einsteinian light speed restricted universe, I think, is quite interesting, especially when we're so used to hyperdrives.
Yeah, but it's just like, oh, you move at the speed of plot. No. Plot moves at the speed of light here.
Exactly.
So I think if you haven't read this series, I'm going to spoil so much of it right now. Right? Let's start with as best I can. So humanity starts off on Earth. That's not so much a spoiler. That's where we are right now, unless you're listening to this in the distant future. In which case, I'm glad we made it. So humanity expands. We hit Mars. There's a bit of a colony there. It expands even further out to Jupiter. The peeps at Jupiter start a government system called Demarchy, Democratic Anarchy, where everyone has implants in their head that allow them to be polled on any political issue. And the collective will is decided by everybody instead of by representatives. We also have a different group on Mars who go one step further and trigger like a full shared consciousness experience where they can beam thoughts directly into each other's minds, and they call themselves the Conjoiners. The Conjoiners end up advancing rapidly, and it kind of spooks baseline humans who are like, oh no, don't put any implants in my head. So they end up with a little bit of a war that ends with them ejecting out into deep space. The Conjoiners escape a barricade, and they're off and away. They end up developing the later starships that make all the rest of the universe possible because they're just so much more advanced. Over time, the Democists spread out from Sol System, and they end up founding a bunch of different colonies. One of them is Yellowstone, which becomes like the new center of civilization. Around Yellowstone, we have the Glitter Band, which is all these orbital habitats, some 10,000 of them, where everyone lives in perfect democracy, but under whatever governance system they want. The only underlying rule is that you cannot impede somebody's right to vote. And as a result, we have some habitats that are just pleasure gardens. We have some habitats that are like idyllic meadows. We have some that are voluntary tyranny. We have some where everyone's a brain in a jar, but everyone gets to vote on the issues that affect them. Then everything goes to shit when a plague comes along that kind of messes with nanotechnology, and all of these people with implants suddenly have to get them out or risk being like transmogrified into the buildings and any other like substrate that also has nanotech. So civilization dramatically falls at this point. And then we enter the late stage, where on one of these archaeological digs on a little colony planet far from Yellowstone, somebody activates, it's like the equivalent from 2001: A Space Odyssey. They activate a little sentry left by an elder civilization. And that triggers a slow advance of an implacable foe whose purpose has kind of been corrupted over many, many millennia. It tries to come and extinguish all life. And then we enter the bit where humanity is on the run trying to survive as this spectre from the darkness chases them down. How's that for a recap?
Incredibly detailed.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I think you touched on the main bits. We've got a couple of different models of humanity. We have this like civilization that has essentially fallen due to this weird ass melding plague, and then we've got later on this implacable threat kind of looming at the edges.
Yeah, we've kind of got this constant tension between the different types of humanity that exist and the existential threat that bears down on them.
Yeah, I think it's a fun universe to play in. Shall we pick a story?
I think that's a good way to go about it. My introduction to this one, like the very first one that I read back in the day, which is still one of my favorite pieces of short fiction, I would like to kick us off with Diamond Dogs.
Diamond Dogs!
Diamond Dogs.
Yeah, so Diamond Dogs is an interesting one. Diamond Dogs is... How do I explain Diamond Dogs? A mysterious individual picks some other unique individuals for a mission. This is after the fall of what Jordan was calling the Belle Epoque. This is like after the melting plague. Human civilization is a bit messed up. And so someone is looking for unique individuals to take on a unique mission. And that unique mission is to an alien artifact. And that alien artifact is a series of increasingly difficult puzzles in the sort of maths and physics space. And as you get further into this, I think it's canonically like a pyramid or an obelisk or a tower or something.
Giant spire. Floating spire, notably. It doesn't touch the ground and nobody knows why.
Yeah, it hovers like a meter off the ground. Yeah, so this spire, they're like, we don't know what's at the top, but we want to get there. The only way to get there is to work your way through all these puzzles. And as the puzzles get harder, the individuals start to dip more and more into mental modification. So they start to like overclock their brains more and more and more with drugs and then computers and nanotech and stuff. But also the doors to each floor also get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so they get to the point where they are starting to like remove limbs and replace them with artificial replacements so that they can continue to ascend this tower. And by the end, what they are left with, and this is, as Jordan said, all massive spoilers, but by the end, what they are left with, and what they're promised they can be reversed from, but they can't, is these dog-like creatures whose brains run at incredible speed.
Like greyhounds, glittery with technology.
Hence diamond dogs. So, yeah, we've got this puzzle whose only purpose appears to be to force the people who are going through it to do particular things to themselves as part of the puzzle, which is fascinating. If we were going to turn this into a game, how would we do it?
I mean, we've already got like the seed of this, right? It's a puzzle dungeon, and we've got a diverse cast of characters. We've got a cyberneticist who like lives in secret because he went too far modifying other people's bodies and then self-experimented. We've got someone who's like swum with an alien algae and has like unusual brain patterns that allows her to be better at maths.
Yeah, we have a bunch of character classes, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Except instead of being like warrior, wizard, rogue, all of their classes are just like specializing in different kinds of math. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Puzzle Dungeon is absolutely correct. And
like failing the puzzle has a cost. In this one, literally like the early failures are not so bad, but later on, like the walls start like sending out tendrils that sever limbs and cut people's body parts off and bleed them out and chop them up. And it's like always a measured amount of consequence that happens.
It's not that different from something like Tomb of Annihilation, really. Like one of those classic gauntlet type trap dungeon situations. But I think the difference is the intent, the sense of like forcing the characters towards a particular end state.
I think this is a dungeon that's about people trading humanity to follow an obsession.
Yeah. Well, that's what the book is about. And so I think the thing that you need to add in, I think you can just work with the tools you would normally use to design a puzzle dungeon, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a sec. But you need to also give the players the tools to start changing themselves, right? They need to be able to back out, modify themselves, and then go back in stranger than they were before.
And that modification has to come with a cost.
Exactly.
Where it's a piece of humanity, some of their memories, like literally losing bits of their brain so they can devote more of it to maths.
The whole thing is kind of like a messed up version of evolution, right? Like there is a strong selection pressure towards a particular mental and bodily end state. And the puzzle dungeon is just the tool that you're using to get people to the end state that you as a fiendish, messed up alien type want. I mean, that's an interesting question for you, right? Like, do you think there is anything canonically at the top of the spire?
Yeah, we haven't said it yet, but our main character in this story never reaches the top of the spire. They end up leaving, going back to Yellowstone, and then later on, he slinks back out, still driven by obsession, to try one more time to get to the top.
Just one more run.
This leads me to something that I think is super important, right? We have to have the changing identity of the character as they sacrifice bits of themselves to progress the story. Mm-hmm. And they have to want to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Going into this, you players have to know that this character is in the most mentally stable state, like a Call of Cthulhu character. They're at their best at the start, and it only gets worse for them as they follow this obsession. And then the physical imagery of that character has to change as well.
Yeah, I think Call of Cthulhu is a great one to bring up because it does map quite well to not so much the mechanic of sanity points, but that idea that your character will probably not make it to the end and certainly won't make it to the end in their current state. It is in that sense really Lovecraftian. There was one thing that I saw last time we were at PAX. There was one thing that I saw the Penny Arcade guys do really well. And that was when they were playing this, again, a similar kind of like a gauntlet thing. As they got closer, the game master, who was Chris Straub, had them start like removing things from their character sheet every time they took damage. So it was like, oh, the presence takes your knowledge of fighting, right? So remove gunplay or whatever it is from your character sheet. Like that knowledge has been just like scooped out of your head, and modifying the character sheet. So I think I would have that kind of thing for this. I would have whatever system we were using, I would come prepared to just like modify the character sheets without going through any of the processes.
What I think would be a good way of doing this is we first of all structure. We prep a bunch of puzzles, and you have some like skills that might apply to them that the characters can trade off, but then you have all of these other facets on your character sheet that are there to be ablated. And
you got to have some.
You're constantly
some
sitting there in the moment
there.
being like, I can't solve this one, so I need to lose this aspect of me. And yeah, maybe it's like, well, like we're not fighting anyone up here, and despite the fact that I was an accomplished martial artist, let's put all of those memories into a chip and I'll come back to them later, I guess.
Yeah, you'll definitely come back to those. That's the other thing about the structure is it really closely resembles a roguelike. Like they make it a certain distance and then someone doesn't make it, or they decide to tap back out. And so you end up with the same set of characters taking runs at this goal, but modifying themselves between runs. So I think whatever you prep needs to also have that structure. So we need a lot of puzzles. We also want a structure that's going to allow us to break progressing through those puzzles into runs and give the players the option to, because that's how the spire works in the book, is once you start the puzzle, you have to
complete it,
either finish it or fail it and get punished. But until you choose to start the puzzle, all of the doors below you reopen and you can leave. So like, are you going to commit to this puzzle, or do you want to go back and like throw some more humanity into the pyre, and come back even more adapted? So yeah, I think structurally we're looking at like puzzles that increase in difficulty, and puzzles that increase in difficulty with the option to back out, make modifications to yourself, and then come back as an even better tool.
I think that's absolutely nailed it. So prep-wise, what are we doing?
Puzzles, are you doing actual puzzles that they need to solve, or are you doing puzzles that need to be solved in character? So are they puzzles for the players or puzzles for the characters for this one?
This is one that I think is genuinely difficult line to navigate. I think I would be doing puzzles for the players, but their characters can utilize skills to get hints. So I think this would actually be quite a prep heavy dungeon to run, because if I'm giving these puzzles out, I want to have handouts that, like, if there's any visual elements, make it really obvious and clear. And I'd put it out for my players so that they can sit there, pore over it, banter with each other. Oh, I don't remember. Is there a time limit for each of the puzzles?
There is.
Yeah, there's like I would.
But only once you nominally choose to start the puzzle.
Yeah, when you commit to it, the door's shut, and then you have a time limit. So I would have like a sand timer, a visible timer that allows them to sit there, pore over it, build the stress and the tension until they snap, make a decision, or don't and get punished as a group for it.
Yep.
And I would start by drawing my puzzles from like puzzles for 4-year-olds and escalate from there.
But even like a puzzle for a 4-year-old, if you put a timer on it, is quite stressful. Yeah, I was going to suggest those little escape rooms in a box. Have some good ones that you can just raid. But yeah, that kind of thing, and having some, when they go down and get modified, then you would start giving them a hinted or an easier version of the same puzzle. But I think you're right. I think this is quite prep heavy, and I think having
I reckon I would give
skill...
free hints if they've modified themselves in particular ways. Almost kind of like in Gumshoe, where if you have access to the skill, you just get that clue.
Yeah.
So like if they don't have that body mod, then I'd be like, you can roll for it and see if your character would know it. But if you mod yourself, oh no, you're guaranteed to get that. And then you can still choose to roll to maybe get some more.
But yeah, I think this is one of the times when doing it in quote marks for real having a real time limit and having real puzzles that the players have to like look at and be like, do we think we can solve that? Do we think we need a hint? Like making the easiest way to access the same feelings that the characters are having and the same feelings that are the tone of the whole thing is to actually do puzzles. So I don't really think there's any way around it for this one. This is, I know we love a skill challenge on the show, but this is not one where you could just make it a skill challenge. Like, I think the players have to be doing the puzzles.
Absolutely. Like in terms of what those puzzles look like, I would definitely get ones that are like spatial placement puzzles, maybe something like 3D printed, assemble these shapes into a cube or a tangram or some. Oh, you could
even raid those cursed like IQ test books.
Yeah,
you know, the ones like which is the next shape in this sequence. But yeah, raiding all sorts. It doesn't mean you have to come and try and design the puzzles, but like I think collecting a bunch of like different puzzles from all over the place, I think would make
notably fun. For this one, the puzzles have to have a definite answer. I know there's like a school of DMs out there who will come up with an interesting scenario and then just like see what the players do until it sounds fictionally relevant enough to be like, yep, that solves it. I don't think you could do that here. This has to be a like, oh, if it's multi-choice, B is the right answer and the others are wrong.
And if they are wrong, you are punished.
Someone's losing a limb.
With violence. Yeah, I think that's good.
The other thing that I would get my players to do right at the start is to sketch out what their character looks like and come prepared with like a bunch of keystone memories. And I want that sketch because we're erasing bits of it.
Write memories on index cards, and then you literally have to like hand over
burn them,
or personality traits or whatever. Like you have to hand them over to the game master and watch them like tear them up in front of you.
I think there's got to be something transgressive like that. Some like
just like I'm gonna put these in a pile, and you can definitely have those memories put back in later.
Wink.
Which we know in the book does not happen. So, Diamond Dogs, we need a stack of puzzles. We need to be planning or pacing out a game structure where characters or players will have multiple runs at the puzzles. We want to give the players options to modify themselves between runs for hints at answers to the real puzzles. And we want them to come prepared with some visceral ways to like take things off their character or out of their character that they can symbolically, but also literally like trade in for an edge on the puzzles.
Yeah.
How does that sound?
I think that's on point. I would be playing the soundtrack that I love called Songs for Dead Planets because I think that is the right amount of dread in the background.
I'll link that one in the show notes. Sick. All right, let's speed run the last couple questions. Would you run this in 5e?
No.
See, I actually think you could. I think it could work. I think this is one of those...
Sorry, that was just reflex. I absolutely would run this in 5e.
The structure is very independent from the system, and I think it works well for especially the kind of play that we see with 5e, where players get very attached to their characters and lots of backstory. I'm like, that is actually perfect. Hand me pieces of your backstory and I will lop bits off your character.
I think you've also got a really easy one of like, oh no, I'm going to go out and modify. That gives you proficiency in a skill. And
again, there's an advantage here to having character sheets with so many little greebles on them because those are little bits that you can rip off. It's like, I'm just gonna delete your performance skill. Music has no meaning to you now. It's all just patterns. If you weren't doing this in 5e, what would you do it in?
I actually have a bit of a tough call on this one. I might choose something like a basic role-playing or a Call of Cthulhu. Something that's got like a big skill list that allows you to very easily say numbers on this go down or disappear. Numbers on this go up.
I think Cthulhu is a good choice. Really any of the Cthulhu games, because they are built with that kind of slow abrasion of the character in mind. So we're not necessarily doing it through sanity loss, but it's that they are kind of built to have the players degrade over the course of the game.
Yeah, I think that would work quite well.
Last question, would you run this?
I would absolutely do this. I think this would be a hell of a lot of fun. It would just take me pulling my finger out and doing way more prep than I'm used to doing.
Yeah, I'm like, I would never do this because it's too much work.
I'd do it, and I'd do it for literally every friend that I can convince to come play with me just to maximize the value of that Pret.
Yeah.
All right, shall we jump onto another story in the same universe?
Yeah, let's do number 2. We've moved forwards in the show, but I think we're moving backwards in the timeline to the Belle Epoque, that period Jordan was talking about, where we've got a bit of a golden age for humanity. It's all a bit, rather than being gothic, it's all a bit baroque, and we have this like infinite diversity of human civilizations or of societies in orbit around a planet in habitats, and the only thing that they all have in common is that everyone gets to vote on the issues that affect their habitat, their community, but otherwise these habitats are infinitely different. And the folks in charge of enforcing this enforced voting,
the Space Cups,
are Space Cups, the Australian Electoral Commission. No, they're called Panoply, and they are, the closest thing this world has to cops, given that there's only one true law, which is that everyone gets a vote. And that's kind of where we come in, I guess, because the next one we want to talk about is the Prefect, or I guess any of the Prefect Dreyfus emergencies. The first one is called the Prefect, but is now retitled as Aurora Rising. But they're all pretty much the same in that they are all cop stories or detective stories, really. Yeah, I think really the core of what we're looking at here is it's a detective story. We have a bunch of, or space detectives, we have some clues spread across a bunch of different habitats, and each of those habitats is wildly different. And collecting the clues in the stories is as much about an excuse to explore a bunch of different habitats and just dip into them and dip out of them as an outsider as it is about actually solving the mystery. Like these books are as much about Alastair Reynolds flexing his creative muscle and being like, how many wildly bizarre structures for human society can I come up with?
Look at my worlds that I have built.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna have my gruff detective like pop into them for a chapter or two and then pop out once he's found the clue, and once we've kind of had a little taste of like how this pocket of society operates, and we do that a bunch of times, and then that's how we solve the mystery. It's got all of that gothic stuff in the background, but it's literally the before times of the main sequence. This is the like the golden age. This is the decadent
Anything is
times.
possible. You meet people who are
very
like gene crafted. Now they're part horse, part person. You got people who are like cybernetically enhanced to the gills. I remember there's one Ultranaut in this era who's just like got a hole in the middle of his body, just plumbed all of the bits around a big hole for no other reason than to show off that he's not a baseline human. Structurally, it's a police procedural. It's an investigation of some sort. What are the bits that you're going to actually prep?
I mean, I think this is a classic use case for a node-based mystery.
You'd say that. Yes.
We haven't really done detective stories properly, which maybe we should. But this is a detective story, and a detective story is a great fit for a bunch of nodes and a bunch of vectors sort of pointing between them. And I think you just put one node per wacky habitat.
So I would go one step further and say each habitat is its own subseries of nodes. So it's like a fractal pattern where you go to a habitat and there's like a small series of encounters that you can play around with to feed clues to your players. And then when they've solved that area, you get to zoom back out and be like, which habitat are you going to next? Let's do it again.
Yeah. We string those together into the vectors that you need to solve some overarching mystery. And because
democracy crime.
Yeah, because Panoply only get involved when there is almost an existential threat. Like they don't intervene in the day-to-day affairs of
they don't solve murders.
Individual habitats.
That's up to the governance of the individual habitats to deal with. However they see fit.
We have a basically carte blanche to introduce like something that threatens the whole of civilization, and just your ordinary everyday cop is the guy who has to deal with it.
And that cop doesn't have a gun even. He just has like a snake whip.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing is like if you like want to use any kind of weapons beyond your non-lethal baton whip, you have to get a vote passed for like use of force. So it's like I think it's an interesting one to play in the maybe what we might call the post-cop era, because it's like actually all of the
This is where the police have already been defunded.
Exactly. It's like this is state-sanctioned violence actually has to be sanctioned by a majority. Like so every time the cops want to beat someone up, it has to be put to a vote and people have to vote on whether they're allowed to beat someone up or not. Like it's, again, the sociology is fascinating.
There's no military-industrial complex because everyone has to vote for there to be a military-industrial complex. And that turns out people just don't want that by and large.
Yeah. They would rather spend money on their literal pleasure domes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this one, as we said, very straightforward. I think it's a node map, and each node maps to a habitat, and then you got to just come up with some wacky societies to like put in them. And as always, I think the best place to look for like wacky ways to structure human societies is actual human societies.
I was going to say there are 3 ways that I would go about building who's in the habs. And it's like, one is Wikipedia.
Yep.
Just sit there and look at other places that have happened and look at like strange like cultural phenomenon from civilizations past and present that you can be like, what if we turn that up to 11? And like everyone who's there absolutely wants to be there.
Exactly. It's like every hab is a permanent medieval reenactment society, right? It's like everyone there has opted into that lifestyle. And so you've got to imagine like an entire orbital belt of worlds that are just like every single one is a Renaissance fair, but for a very specific
demographic.
Like, yeah, exactly. A very specific set of interests.
Okay, so the next one is you go to like whatever your local convention center is and look at their yearly schedule. And that becomes the table that you roll on.
Oh boy, like, what do you do when it's like...
FetLife's coming to town.
I was going to say, we went very different directions. I'm like, what do you do when it's like the accountant convention?
Oh, mate.
It's like,
I was born for that.
This hab is just all accountants. Like, how does that society run? Okay, you've sold me.
My other 2 ways of generating civilizations for this. One would be crib from whatever your favorite space opera media is. It's like, one of these is definitely going to be the Empire from Star Wars. That's a voluntary tyranny with a Darth Vader-esque figure who just like rocks up and brutalizes people. But they love it. That's why they're there. And then the third one would be any gonzo game that you've got, anything that's just got the wackiest, wildest tables on it, I would just pick from that and then just start rolling dice and see what unusual concepts you get and then be like, how would that turn into a society? And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to make it fully internally consistent because you're only going to be dipping into it for an hour or so of play.
Yeah.
It's just enough so that you can peel back a little bit of the curtain and let your players see that there's so much more on the other side. You don't have to pull it all the way back so that they realize the edges on either side are super unrendered.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we've got a procedural mystery that revolves around voter crime or voter suppression or something along those lines.
Or some existential threat to the entire...
Yeah.
Like
existential threat? Collapse of civilization? Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you run this in?
You ready for this? I think 5e would be great for it.
What? Really?
Yeah. I actually think you could very easily... Yeah. Like, it's just a bunch of, like, separate planes, effectively. Little demi-planes that are all under their own little governance structure. I could easily see this fitting into Sigil in, like, a Planescape-esque setting.
Or like, something Spelljammery.
Yeah, like OG Spelljammery, not the 5e Spelljammery, but yeah, same. Yeah, I think it'd actually be really easy to just jam that right in there. That being said, this one can fit so many structures. This is a design pattern that is system agnostic to a large degree.
I'm what a fun reversal. I actually think this one I would usually you can definitely run this in 5e with some tweaking guy. I think part of the joy of this one is the setting itself. And I think it's the setting itself that lets you do a lot of the cool things that we want to do in this. And so I would be running it canonically as like, we are above Yellowstone in the glitter band.
If I wanted to run it canonically, then I wouldn't use 5e.
I wouldn't want to do an adaptation of this because I think so much of the fun of it is in the setting. And I also think that this is a very approachable part of the setting.
Super approachable. It's very forgiving.
Explain to people. It's very forgiving. All you have to say is like, basically what we've told you here. It's like there is a ring of habs around a planet. Each hab has its own rules, but the only rule that you can't violate is, it's almost like the opening monologue to Law and Order, right? Like in the criminal justice system. Dong dong.
Don't take away a voter's rights.
But it is, right? It's like, it's Law and Order glitter band. Law and Order Yellowstone SVU. But yeah, I think it's an easy part of the setting to introduce. It's an easy microcosm to introduce. You can get through it with maybe only a couple minutes of briefing of the setting. People don't have to have read the books. And it's one where you don't need to worry about stepping on canon too much because
you can make canon as you go.
Exactly. The books are kind of isolated incidents. And
you see maybe 8 habitats worth of population out of 10,000.
So it's like, we can't say for sure that what you have done is not canon. And I think that's a great way to make people feel like they're actually playing in the world, is to be like, well, there are so many options. It's like, you could very plausibly play a canon feeling Stargate game because it's like, well, you don't have to be SG1. You could be SG37 and there's like hundreds of worlds to visit, and you can just slide right into a canon series of events very easily. I think this is the same. It's like you are Panoply agents who have not been named in the books, but there's no reason you couldn't be, and you're visiting habitats that haven't been seen in the books, but then there's no reason that they couldn't. And if you want to throw something like a reference in there for the folks who have read the books, that's great. But like, there's no hard blockers on doing something that feels very canonical. So I would be running this in the setting, and I would probably use, I haven't recommended this for a while, I'd probably use something like Fate.
I knew you'd say Fate. I was going to say mine would be a Gumshoe.
Yeah,
I think you could just very easily change the names on some of the Gumshoe skills. And
I haven't done a lot of Gumshoe, but I think if I had, I would probably be recommending that instead.
Cool beans. So, would you run it on 5e?
Look, yes, but I think it loses a lot of the charm.
Fair.
You end up translating so much stuff to like, oh, this is a demi-plane and this is the third, but
see,
it's like,
this is one of those instances where I think that extended universe actually is really easy to crib from. Would you run it?
Yeah, I probably would.
I would probably prefer to run this one for people who are familiar with the works, because I think like just a little bit of literacy in the space would yield more interesting choices from the players. But I do think you can run it with a total like blind group who's never seen it before.
Or a mix. It's one where, again, like, it's one where knowing what canonically happens in the books doesn't actually give you a huge amount of
canon
advantage.
Doesn't bind you in this.
Yeah.
I think it's just a familiarity with the world could be fun.
Yeah.
All right. One more?
One more? You think we need one more? You think we need one more?
I think we need one more. We need to get to that late stage era where humanity is
to get to
in trouble.
All we've done so far has been like the side pieces, right? Like we have not actually touched the core like Revelation Space novels. Everything else has been either prequels or short stories, which are great. But like, let's tackle the main sequence.
All right.
How do we do that?
Let's not start with the first one though, because the first one is a very great scene setter that shows you a lot of stuff. I think we should jump right to the middle of the action.
Jump straight into the... Look, It's always a good idea to jump into the middle.
Take it all the way to the middle.
I think we can treat that main sequence of novels almost as a block as a unit. And we're not aiming for necessarily Revelation Space. We're not necessarily aiming for Inhibitor Phase. We're aiming for like the vibe of that whole main series, with the exception of
this
Absolution Gap, because it sucks.
Yeah, Absolution
Sorry,
Gap
Al.
could absolutely be abridged. It's definitely the weakest one in the series. You could cut maybe 2/3 of that book out and have the same punchy impact.
Oh, these are hot takes. Too hot for the show.
Sorry, Al, my dude. But like the rest of your work's hot shit. It's just, every now and then, sometimes it's just
Everyone
shit.
has a dud
Anyway,
every now and then.
I think like the epitome book for this era for me is Redemption Arc. And the like absolute spark notes of this is there is a space chase between two ships traveling at relativistic light speed to reach a cache of mystical powered weapons, things that tap into fundamental forces of the universe that were created hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago because a group saw into the future to try and combat this existential threat while a planet is being evacuated. I feel like that has just got so many big things that you can key off, right?
A lot of moving parts, and it really taps into the other side of the universe, not so much the Baroque side, but like the Gothic side. We have the darkness infringing on the edges. We have the race against time. We have a lot of really messing around with like what it means to be human, and a lot of messing around with like sacrificing parts of that, and how much of that can we sacrifice to like beat the threat. This has all of the fun bits. We're very much zoomed out rather than zoomed in.
Like this space chase takes years of in-world time, where like there's a ship in front and a ship behind, and the ship in front is doing their best to try and shake off the ship behind by literally spending years building stuff and recycling ship material to make traps and such. I do really like that the prize at the end of the road is like the big MacGuffin. They're this secret cache of unique weapons that are just so absurdly destructive.
And I think you're right. I think this is a good one to pick because the last book is really just all-out war using those weapons, and the first book is really just set up. This is kind of the ramp up, which is maybe the fun part to skateboard on. Says a man who's never skateboarded.
I'm gonna be like, we are not qualified to say that.
Okay, so let's strip it right back, right? Like, what is the structure here? What is actually happening in this story? It's a race. It's a chase, right?
Yes.
Across space.
It is a space chase race.
It rhymes, and so it must be true. And the prize at the end is the tools to win the coming war against the darkness that is creeping in at the edges. And the opponent is someone who we actually probably agree with more than we disagree with. They're certainly still human for some definition of the word, but they just want the weapons for their own agenda, or to pursue their version of the coming war rather than our version of the coming war.
Exactly right. They're not fundamentally opposed. It's just that they have a different ideology.
Yeah. And different ideas about who should be saved and who should be sacrificed and what the strategy is. But like, we're not like racing against some horrible evil, and we're not racing against some inexplicable or incomprehensible alien. We are racing against other people who just have different ideas to us about what the right thing to do is, which I think makes it much tighter.
So I think the structure under this one here is there are a finite number of opportunities, like a finite amount of time that can be spent trying to shake off the pursuer, trying to destroy them, or trying to convince them that you should work together. I feel like those are kind of like the three broad buckets of what the quote-unquote attacks could be.
Yeah, we are like generating advantage of various kinds, right? Like, we are...
I don't know that it has to be necessarily resolved in the chase. It could all be stuff that changes when you slow down at the other end. So like, whatever you're racing towards, that situation is heavily informed by what happened on the journey.
Yeah. Oh, I've just had a thought. Okay, I'll put a pin in that.
Why?
So when you're talking about like, oh, we've got a couple of actions that we can take, and we've got a set amount of time before we reach a known end state, and then after that, what happens is perhaps undefined. My head immediately went to Quiet Year. Right? So you can start projects or have a discussion, then they might change your abundances and scarcities. Like, I actually think that could work really well for a story
you're
like
right,
this.
but I also think it'd be a lot of work to build that game.
Oh yeah, you'd have to redo all of the cards. I think you can use the basic structure. You'd have to rebuild all of the cards. But what I would almost do is have 2 tables to be 2 ships. Yeah, or split the table in 2 and have half of them playing on one ship and half of them playing on the other. And you can start projects within your ship to like, I'm going to start a project to like enhance the engines and make the ship go faster, or I'm going to start a project to like, build some traps that we can drop behind us into the light speed path of the other one.
Somebody acts like the referee to be like, oh, if you wanted to build better engines and go faster, that would be like a long project. You can't just say that'd be a 2-turn project.
Well, no, but that's how the Quiet Year works, right? Is like we all agree it'd be something where it would become more of a collaborative storytelling game, I think, than a role-playing game.
Could be very fun, though. Like, I really like the idea of having these 2 groups, like, weaponizing and manufacturing new things on their ships as the ships are flying. Like, literally building the ships as they're flying them. And having there be a somewhat limited amount of information that travels between them, because you do get information traveling from one to the other, but it's a bit restricted, and that's the spicy bit. There's always got to be that cloud of uncertainty of like, what are the 4 projects they're working on right now, and can I build some sort of a preemptive defense against them? That'd be fun.
Oh, it's good.
Absolutely not where I was going.
No, I'm like, I just recently played some more Quiet Year, and I'm like, man, this is my new thing. It's like, is this a Quiet Year mod? No, it's like, is this a picture? Is this a mod to a Quiet Year? The last inappropriate one of those I suggested was Mean Girls for memory.
Yes.
Kids jostling for like
Social
position
prestige.
and authority, social capital in a cafeteria. Is this the Quiet Year? Now it's like 2 light huggers on a desperate race to find the hypermetric weapons. Is this the Quiet Year?
I think this is the Quiet Year is a sedan, and you are slapping the roof saying, this can fit so many IPs in it.
Oh, man. But it fits. It's like, then when we reach the end, like when we reach the weapons cache, we don't know what will happen.
Absolutely. I think
And I love the idea of like
great
ending
structure.
that. You've spent this whole journey jostling for advantage, and you reach the end, and it's like, and what happens after that is like, the game is over. What happens after that is like undefined. I kind of fucking love that. That feels very Revelation Space. The tension and the sense of doom and the terseness. I don't know. I think that could fucking slap.
I'm inclined to agree. I think that would be sick. I, of course, however, was going to say a Forge in the Dark game.
Look, that works as well, and I think it's no coincidence that they share some structures. They share this idea of like projects and project clocks and things sort of ticking down, and they share a very strong like phase structure and turn taking structure.
I was going to say I would run this as like a series of micro scores on the ship. Where like
exactly.
You're punching through these elements really quickly, because like you're in a pretty closed microcosm, right? You're on your one ship, you've got a dozen face characters and then like 2,000 background people that we don't really care about. And I was thinking I would steal some aspects. Like if we were going to run this for a bit longer, and you have that creeping dark actually start penetrating into the play, I would steal some elements from Band of Blades, which is like the hopeless retreat of a fallen legion. The world's already gone to shit, and we're just trying to run. This one...
They really do have a Blades in the Dark mod for everything, don't they?
Yeah. And it's one of the OG ones as well. But I would absolutely steal that as the overwhelming presence of the longer you wait, the worse it gets. Like, you can't stay behind because that guarantees failure. And the only chance of survival is weapons cache at the end. And then if we were doing this as a one-shotter, I would just have like a bunch of micro scores. That's like, you have like 3 opportunities in this 4-hour session to try and push the needle towards your side. How are we going to do it? What are the projects you're going to set up? Let's dance.
Yeah. That would also slap. And I think there's some fun because like moving between ships doesn't happen instantaneously, right? Like if you're accelerating to catch up or decelerating to catch them to do a job in person, like that's going to have relativistic effects, right? So you might slow down to, drop into the ship that's behind you, and to catch up again, like that might be decades, right? Like because of the way that the time works, time is going to pass differently for you if you're hopping between the ships as it will on either ship. And I think that has some really fertile ground for like character moments and relationships and things like that. Yeah. Exactly. That could be really cool. In a way that maybe the overarchingness of the Quiet Year wouldn't. This would like, you would put your characters in a shuttle or whatever. And it's like, well, the time dilation means that this will be a couple hours for us, but this is going to be years on the rest of the ship.
It's straight up so the Interstellar.
It is,
where they drop down to the ocean planet, pop back up.
And it's been years. And yeah, I think there's some chances to have some really like impactful moments as you like come back from the job and years have passed back on the ship and you get a really fun downtime where you're like, now we explore what's changed between when you left to run the job and when you get back. Again, it gives you options with the idea of projects, because you could leave, a couple hours pass for you, a couple months pass back on the ship, and you get back and all the projects you started are done.
They're like actually mothballed and covered in dust. You've been going for so long.
You get to use the in-universe time dilation to like compress the Blades in the Dark structure so that you can do projects on a one-shot type time scale. Like you don't get to resolve projects in Blades unless you're doing a campaign. This, I think, the fact that there's time dilation happening lets you play with that project stuff in the context of a one-shot, which I think could be really fun.
If I'm gonna do that, I would have players who are already literate with Blades in the Dark mechanics. So you can be like, hey guys, we're gonna do this, but downtime's gonna be 10 minutes because all your projects are gonna like self-complete in your absence.
Yeah.
Like, think long
and all term. With everything that entails, right? Like, they might not actually be completed in the way that you want them because you weren't there to do it.
Like, we'd absolutely do some action rolls to see how well their vision marries up with what the reality of it is. All right. So we kind of like merged our discussion there on content structure and system. So I'm going to jump straight to the $1 million question. Would you run it in 5e?
Nah.
Absolutely not the right game for this. And I feel like my negative answer here is lent more weight by saying that I actually would use 5e to run something earlier. I'm going to co-stuff that for a really long time now.
It's too much of it is tied to the isolatedness of being near light speed and the messiness of relativity, and that creates such a unique sense of isolation of like, we are racing towards this thing and we cannot slow down. Oh, now I'm questioning it. So there's a bit of a trope that like one of the best Star Trek movies is Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World, the movie about ships, because it's like it has a lot of the tropes of like a crew, and the crew are like isolated on the ship. And it's like, actually, if you took all of those elements and just like put the ship into space, it would be one of the best Star Trek movies ever made. And I think I'm like, maybe there is a version of this where you don't get to play with the time dilation stuff, but you can do the like, you could do 2 literal ships racing to a goal and have that work in 5e. The problem is really that 5e is too tied to the setting, right? So if you're going to do something using the 5e system, you kind of have to do it in a generic fantasy setting. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe that works with literal ships. It doesn't have the impact, but like maybe a ship chase works.
I think you lose too much. The fiction kind of breaks down a little bit. The reason you have so much you can crib from on your spaceship is because it's a kilometer long and has like dozens of decks and heaps of material and like a huge comet's worth of ice around it. But when you're on a literal wooden ship, there's a lot less you can cannibalize to turn into weapons.
And look, maybe that is where the magic comes in.
In which case, you're just doing spells.
Yeah.
Like,
look,
there's no
impossible.
tension in that.
I think you could make it work. I think you could have a similar experience of that 2 sort of racing ships type thing. Again, it would take a lot of work, and it would take away some of the
I think it'd take a lot of work, and it would still fall flat. It wouldn't be
exactly. You lose some of the fun vibes of the setting.
Yeah. A lot of work, and you end up with a lackluster mod. That's DM's Guild.
Just the moral of the story every single time. Whew.
Good speedrun. Good vignettes.
That was fun. We should do 3 episodes at once more often.
Now taking offers for whatever other thing you want to do. Like, we could literally do this in Star Wars.
I was just thinking, like, we have been so frightened to tackle Star Wars because there's so much of it, but maybe this is the model.
It's so much of it, and I haven't played all the Star Wars games, and some people believe really strongly in their game. It's a bit scary.
Yeah. No, I was thinking, like, maybe this is how we finally get to approach Star Wars. Because I've been watching Andor recently, and that is, like, totally very different.
Literally, day before yesterday, one of my pals sent me a message that said, "You really should watch it. It feels like Blades in the Dark." And I was like,
it really does.
You know how to hot sell something to me.
Mini Star Wars, mini Andor episode within the Revelation Space episode, just like Blades in the Dark for Andor. Incredible. Perfect match.
Look, I'll get around to watching it one day.
Put it on your list. All right, shall we wrap it up there then?
I think so. We've just smashed through 3 different types of game that you can play in the same universe to evoke wildly different vibes. I'm pretty happy with that.
Revelation Space 3 ways. Roasted, boiled, and fried. Don't ask me which one is which. I'll overthink it. This has been Platonics. I've been Rocky.
I'm still Jords.
You can find us in so many places on the internet. The best place to start and the place where you'll find all the others is our website at playtonics.net. That's playtonics.net. When you get there, you can subscribe to the podcast, which hopefully you've already done if you're listening. You can also sign up to our mailing list to get occasional newsletters about stuff that didn't make it to the show. You can find links to all our social media there too. We are on most of the text-based ones. We're on Blue Sky and Mastodon and Threads. We have a Discord that you can hop in. That is the best place. If you have things that you would like us to cover, that is the best place to get in touch with us. You can just hop in there and tag us. Also the best place to comment on individual episodes. So if you have bits of the Rev Space universe that you want to talk about, there's a thread in there for that as well. And your ticket to entry to that Discord is to tell us your hottest RPG take. So there's a fair few of those to scroll back through now as well, which is great reading. What have I forgotten, Jords?
I think you've nailed it.
I think that's all of it. I think that's all the plugs.
That's it. We're plugged.
All right. Thank you, as always, for listening.
Shit, one more plug.
one more
Buy
plug.
all of Alastair Reynolds' books. I think a really good one to start with is Diamond Dogs, and then Turquoise Days, the other one that
it's
comes
in a twofer,
in the duo.
a novella twofer with Turquoise Days, and they're both
And then
great.
continue your dips by getting Galactic North,
That's
nice
a short
anthology
story
of
collection,
short stories.
which
Yep.
does the absolutely wild thing of taking you from the beginning of the timeline to the end of the timeline. So if you read Galactic North, you know how it all ends. But much like Andor, that actually doesn't take anything away from the stories that happen in between.
Absolutely. There are some really cute character-focused stories in there against this backdrop of hard science. And then
And if you
read
enjoyed
Revelation
those,
Space in its
read
entirety.
Revelation Space.
But yeah, Diamond Dogs, phenomenal fiction. Jump on that.
We should do a because the thing I recommend to link us neatly back to the top of the episode, the thing I recommended you straight after I read Diamond Dogs was like, I think you'd really enjoy Blind Sight,
Oh, yes.
which
I
has a
think
similar.
about how do we gamify that? And it's like, oh yeah, we got some character classes and we got like a horrendously spooky dungeon for them to explore.
And we're gonna make repeated incursions, and people don't always come out, and they certainly don't go back in the same. Like,
Second plug, read Blindsight. Phenomenal book.
I don't like it. That could genuinely be ungameable.
I don't think you can capture the same level of existential dread that you feel at the end of it. It's one of like, I wouldn't call it cosmic horror, but it's the one that made me feel like cosmic horror is supposed to make you feel.
Yeah. Yep. Horrific stuff. So yeah, that's our last plug, is a couple of book recommendations for you.
Go read,
Books are like
nerds.
podcasts, but written down.
They can have heaps of different people talking.
It's wild. They talk inside your head. It's like wackadoodle. All right.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Podcast, but
Written
only
down.
transcript.
It's just oops all transcript.